Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ma'am Manalyn, for that informative discussion about education and economic growth. To continue on the topic, may I ask this question? What exactly are the benefits of education? This might seem like an obvious question or a trivial topic, but in fact, it involves some very deep economic and even philosophical issues. First of all, education increases human capital in the labor force and that raises wages. Workers who can read and write very well are more productive than workers who cannot. Workers who have master's degree or PhD degree in any field are also more productive. Furthermore, this worker may be innovative, and innovation is one of the major drivers of economic growth. An educated workforce is also more able to accept and use the innovation generated by others. Imagine, for instance, education helping a worker work with computers. Many of most important benefits of education are often quite intangible. For instance, education seems to develop a greater sense of conscientiousness, both in the school but also ultimately later in the workplace. Also develop a sense of individual rules as citizens. If you look at the topic about corruption, you'll realize that societies that have greater degrees of trust and greater degrees of cooperativeness can also be less corrupt. Through these indirect channels, a well-educated society may become a less corrupt society, and thus a society better able to enjoy the fruits of economic growth. Education may also make the better voters, better informed voters, and more involved community. Work by economist Brian Kaplan has shown that if individuals are educated, they are more likely to understand the perspectives of economists on economic growth and act accordingly when they get involved in politics. That may sound pretty obvious, but part of the puzzle is when we look at the numbers, it's surprisingly difficult to discover what exactly is the causal connection between education and economic growth. These are the two major problems in connection with education and economic growth. First, by trying to figure out the cause and effect. Wealthier nations have more education, but did they become wealthier nation because they're more educated? Or are people simply more educated because they live in a wealthier nation? Second problem arises once we consider that it's the quality of education that matters and not just the number of years that a person has gone to school for. So if it's the quality of education that matters, the problem then is the quality of educational institution tends to be connected with the quality of a lot of other institutions in the given country. So it's difficult to figure out whether it's the quality of education that contributing to economic growth or quality of institution in the country more generally. Pretty much everyone agrees that education produces significant private returns for people who undergo the education. That is, if you graduate with a good degrees from a good university or college, you will earn considerably more money. But that's quite different from thinking that getting more educated for yourself is going to benefit a lot of other people in society. And when it comes to estimating the social return from education, we are still somewhat in the dark. Sometimes I think about social return to education in Michael Kramer O-ring model. Here's a way to think about how this works. That education matters. But for education to push developing country into takeoff, that economy has to get a lot of other things right also. So if that economy has improved its system of education and done everything else wrong, well, that additional quality education doesn't matter much. Think of takeoff economic growth as a process requiring the developing nation to get 20 or to 30 different things right, including education. So education does matter. It's one of the things you have to get right. But getting education right alone might in fact produce quite small social returns. Despite of these theoretical predictions, the empirical evidence of the impact of education on economic growth has long been mixed. In large part, they seem to reflect measurement problems. Most people would acknowledge that a year of schooling does not produce the same cognitive skills everywhere. They would also agree that family and peers contribute to education. Health and nutrition further impact cognitive skills. Yet, until recently, research on the economic impact of education, largely due to expedience, has almost uniformly ignored these aspects. Recent research shows that ignoring differences in the quality of education significantly distorts the picture of how educational and economic outcomes are related. In conclusion, education is a leading determinant of economic growth, employment, and earnings. Ignoring the economic dimension of education would endanger the prosperity of future generations, with widespread repercussions for poverty, social exclusion, and sustainability of social security systems, wrote by Wusman, 2015. And that would conclude our topic for today. Thank you for listening.